G'day guys, so in my last video I showed you how I glue up one of these panels. So now I got three of them all glued up, all thickness sand to 2 inches, all of them. So now I gotta join all three panels together. And there's a gap here, it's not perfect, right? This one almost is. So what I have to do now is I have to trim about 1/8 of an inch off in my sliding table saw to get a perfectly straight edge and square cut. I've already done it to the middle piece here. On both sides I trimmed it, so now I have to trim this piece here and this piece here, and I'm going to show you how I do that on my sliding table saw. Alright guys, so the next step is I'm going to put these dominoes here. So I'm going to use my Festool domino machine to make these slots in the middle. So when I glue these three panels up, these will assure that the panels will stay perfectly flush. So alright, let's insert these dominoes next. Alright guys, so this is sanded down to 400 grit now. So the first time I sanded this was into the thickness sander, and it was sanded down to 36 grit, and I stopped there with the thickness sander. Then I glued all three sections together, as you see at the beginning of the video. And then I spent a lot of time sanding with 40 grit with my random orbital sander, and I was looking with a flashlight, and I could see all the deep grooves going with the grain caused by the thickness sander, and I had to spend a lot of time looking with the flashlight so I can clearly see the grooves until all the grooves were disappeared. But the 40 grit sandpaper left a lot of swirl marks, okay? So then what I did is I sanded down with 80 grit. Again, looking with a flashlight, making sure the 80 grit sandpaper would remove the deeper scratch caused by the 40 grit. But the 80 grit left some scratches as well, but just smaller. Then I went to 120 grit, again looking with a flashlight, making sure that the 80 grit swirl grooves were removed with the 120 grit. And then I did the same thing with the 220 grit. And then I went with the 400 grit. And I usually stopped at 220 grit, but because I'm finishing this with Odie's oil, I like to go up to 400 grit, and this will give me a nicer finish, more of a satin look instead of dull. So what I did off camera is I sanded this to 400 grit twice already. So I sanded the first time, and then okay, let me go back here before I say why I sanded twice. Usually I would sand once, but this is for a kitchen. There's going to be a sink here, and water is going to splash on there. This is inevitable, and there's no problem with Odie's oil. It's waterproof, but it takes 3 weeks. So try to tell the customers not to use this countertop for 3 weeks, not to put a single drop of water. I doubt that's going to happen. So because Odie's oil takes 3 weeks to cure, as soon as you get a drop of water, it's going to raise the grain, and it's going to feel really rough. And then you have to use 400 grit, sand it down, and then reapply your Odie's oil wherever it's rough. So I want to try to avoid that. So what I did is I sanded down to 400 grit. I sprayed water all over. It raised the grain, and then I sanded down to 400 grit. Now, just for good measure, I'm going to spray water one more time. It might raise the grain a little bit more, swell the grains, and then sand it down to 400 grit, and then finish with Odie's oil. And that way, if there's a little bit of water, it's not going to raise the grain anymore because I've already done it twice. So this is how I do it. Just spray water. You don't need to do much. Believe me, it's going to raise the grain. And all I have to do is wait 1 hour till it's completely dry. And again, sand it down with a 400 grit. And then I'm going to apply my Odie's oil after. Alright, that's it. I'm gonna let it dry for about an hour or so and then sand it again, and then we're gonna apply Odie's oil. Alright guys, so this is sanded to 400 grit again, and I wiped all the dust off with a tack cloth. Anyways, so now I'm gonna use Odie's oil, okay, and I'm gonna apply it with a Merlon pad. This is the box here, Merlon pad. It's micro fine. This is like 2500 grit. You can just use a rag, but I prefer using this here to apply the Odie's oil. You don't need to put it very thick. A little goes a long way. Actually, this little jar here can do 400 square feet. So you just rub it in like that, and then I usually wait 1 hour before buffing it off with a towel. You don't need to wait an hour. You can wait 15 minutes, but it seems like I get better results if I wait an hour. Alright guys, so I just finished applying the Odie's oil, so I'm going to wait about an hour, and then I'm going to buff it off, and then I think it's going to look really good once I buff it off. But I'll just give you a quick overlook of it. So I got 3 drawers here. The drawer fronts are all white pine, and they're all sprayed with a water-based lacquer, 4 coats. And they're all soft closed drawers, and the doors I made myself too. The perimeter of the doors is white pine, and the middle is MDF with a white pine veneer. Again, I sprayed 4 coats on the doors, and the doors are all soft close as well. And over here I got an adjustable shelf. On the sides I put a white pine veneer, and I used the contact cement to put it on. And in the corners I just used like a block of a wood, a white pine, and I made like an angle iron out of it with the table saw. Okay, and at the back here it's a sheet of MDF with a white pine veneer on it. So as you can see, I stood the grain up, so I had to use 2 pieces, and I spliced it in the middle here somewhere. I glued the 2 pieces of plywood together. Here's a better view of the side here. So the customer is going to have a few stools over there to sit, like it's going to be like a bar with a sink on top. So all right, let's wait another 45 minutes or so, and I'm going to buff this thing off and put the sink on, and it should look really nice. Alright guys, it's looking pretty good. This step here is not necessary, but I find it's going to give it more of a polished look. Like it'll shine a little bit more when using this polisher here. Alright, now I'm going to be using a tack cloth just to remove the lint. Wow, it feels so soft, incredible. I can't really explain how this feels. I don't know, it's really soft. It's perfectly like smooth. I think raising the grain with the water bottle really helped too.